Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me.
Someone was sitting in my chair. Not metaphorically, not emotionally, literally, my chair, the one at the end of the table, the one I'd sat in every Christmas Eve since I was old enough to carve the ham. And now there was a stranger in it. Some guy named Brent, wearing a navy sweater with reindeer on it and laughing way too hard at my cousin's dumb story about parking at the mall. I stood there in the doorway, holding a tray of roasted carrots no one had asked me to bring, watching my family pretend not to notice me. Not one person looked up. Not Mom. Not Dad. Not even Lisa, who I once drove across 3 states for when her car broke down in college. The table was full. The chairs were full. The room was full. Except somehow, I wasn't. I could have said something. Could have cleared my throat. Could have joked, "Hey Brent, want to switch seats with the guy who paid for this house's heating last winter?" But I didn't. I just turned around, walked back to my car, and made a call I'd been putting off for 5 years. "Yeah," I said when the lawyer picked up. "Let's start the paperwork. They've made it real easy for me." I stood there like a damn idiot, shoulders squared, mouth half open, holding on to whatever pride I had left while Kendra leaned in like she was about to kiss me on the cheek and slap me on the back all at once. "Oh, Derek, you actually showed up," she said, dragging out the word actually like it was some big shock. "This dinner's just for family, sweetheart." She threw in that last part with a syrupy tone that barely masked the venom underneath. Like I was some confused mailman who'd accidentally wandered into a private wedding reception. She even laughed, for God's sake. A light, practiced chuckle. Polite enough not to cause a scene, but loud enough that everyone in earshot would hear it. I didn't say anything. Not right away. Alyssa was still at the table, directly in my line of sight, staring down at her plate like it had just whispered state secrets to her. Fork in one hand, the other resting on her napkin. She didn't move, didn't even twitch. Hannah leaned toward Ryan and muttered something. Ryan snorted. Both of them turned their heads just enough for me to see the smiles they were trying to hide. Not laughing exactly, just enjoying the show. I turned back to the host, kept my voice calm. "Can you check again, please? My name's Derek Grayson. My father-in-law is Mitchell. It's a family dinner." The host shifted uncomfortably behind his little podium. I could tell he didn't want any part of this. He clicked through the screen again and said, "I'm sorry, sir. The reservation is for 6 guests, and all 6 are already seated. It's a private booking. I can't let you in." I nodded slowly, felt the heat creep up my neck, but forced it down. My fists stayed at my sides. My jaw was tight, but I didn't clench. Behind me, someone's fork scraped across a plate. 2 women at the bar had stopped mid-conversation. The bartender was looking straight at me like he was watching a dog walk on its hind legs. Kendra took a step back, looking pleased with herself. "Places like this," she said, gesturing around with her wine glass. "Bit out of your league, don't you think?" That one stung. Not because it was true, but because she wanted it to be. Because she said it like she knew it was true. I glanced at Alyssa again. Still nothing. She wouldn't even lift her head. That was when I realized something. This wasn't an oversight. This wasn't a mix-up or a missed text. It was intentional. And that meant I had 2 choices. Back down and walk out like the unwanted stray they thought I was, or remind them who the hell I actually was. I turned to the host again, keeping my voice level. "Is Tom here tonight?" The host blinked. "Tom?" "Tom Bishop," I said. "Owner of the place." Kendra tilted her head. "Oh, please, Derek. You're not on a first-name basis with the owner. Let's not make this more awkward than it already is." I ignored her. The host hesitated, then said, He's in tonight, yes." "Good. Tell him Derek's here. Tell him I'm asking for him." The host still looked unsure. "Can I ask what this is in regard to?" "Just let him know," I said, smiling calmly. "He'll know." Kendra laughed. Actually laughed this time, a high, sharp sound that drew even more eyes. "This is sad," she said, shaking her head. "You think name-dropping is going to get you a seat at this table?" "No," I said. "I think respect might." She opened her mouth, probably to say something cutting, but that's when I heard the voice from across the room. "Derek?" Everyone turned, and there he was, Tom Bishop. Salt and pepper hair, black blazer, the same gold-rimmed glasses he'd worn 15 years ago when I was bussing tables and trying to learn the difference between a Burgundy and a Bordeaux. He looked straight at me, smiling like he'd just run into an old friend at a high school reunion. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, crossing the room. "Didn't expect to see you here tonight." I turned toward the voice, and sure enough, there he was, Tom Bishop, in the flesh. Standing tall in that dark navy blazer, silver cufflinks catching the light, looking like the kind of man who didn't just walk into a room, he owned it. He crossed the floor like the restaurant was his living room, which, in a way, it was. His eyes lit up when he got close. "Derek, I'll be damned." He shook my hand with both of his, firm and familiar. "Didn't expect to see you here, kid." I grinned. Apparently, I wasn't expected at all. Tom's smile faltered. He looked past me, then over my shoulder, toward the table where Alyssa still sat frozen. And Kendra, well, she wasn't smirking anymore. "Is that so?" he said slowly. I gave a small shrug. Casual, not bitter. Showed up to join my wife's family dinner. Seems the list was, curated. Tom's brow tightened. He turned to the host. "What's the issue here?" The host stumbled over his words. "The reservation is for 6, and, they've already been seated, sir." Tom waved that off. "Derek's not a walk-in, he's family." The host nodded quickly. "Yes, Mr. Bishop, I'll get a table started." "No need," Tom said, already scanning the room. "Add a seat to their table." He turned back to me. "You hungry?" "I could eat." He smiled again, but this time it had an edge to it. "You still like the dry-aged ribeye? Medium rare, right?" "Still do." "Good man." Tom clapped me on the shoulder like we were back in the kitchen again, 2 decades younger and sweating through a Saturday night rush. I didn't have to look behind me to know Kendra's mouth had gone dry. I could feel the tension from 10 feet away. Tom motioned toward the bar. "Have a seat for a few minutes. I'll have them fix up the table. You'll be sitting where you belong." The host scurried off. Tom leaned in a bit and lowered his voice. "You still working with your hands? Last I heard, you had a few businesses rolling." "Still doing a bit of both. Got a couple projects going, some hands-on, some management." "Good," he said, nodding with approval. "You always had hustle. Remember that time you got chewed out for slicing the duck breast too early?" I chuckled. "And then stayed late for 2 weeks practicing how to plate it." Tom laughed. "You were one of the sharpest we ever had come through. Quiet, but sharp. Never forgot that." And that right there? That's when it shifted. I didn't need to look at Kendra to know she was hearing every word. I didn't need to see Alyssa to know the corners of her mouth had probably turned down in that tight, embarrassed way she got when things didn't go how she planned. This wasn't just me crashing their little dinner. This was me being welcomed by the man whose name was literally on the door. Tom glanced back at their table. "That your wife?" he asked softly. "Yeah. She didn't look real happy to see you. She hasn't been real happy with much lately." He gave a knowing nod but didn't press. A few minutes later, the host returned. "We've made the adjustment, Mr. Bishop." "A seat has been added." Tom nodded. "Good. Send something over to start. Chef's amuse," and put his order through as priority. "Yes, sir." Tom turned back to me. "You go sit down. And Derek?" His voice dropped, just a notch. "Don't let people like that tell you where you belong." I gave him a nod. "Thanks, Tom." I walked toward the table slowly, not with a chip on my shoulder, but with purpose. The extra seat was wedged in between Alyssa and Ryan now. Linen napkin already folded, polished silverware gleaming. I slid into the chair without saying a word. Kendra had her wine glass halfway to her lips and froze mid-sip. Hannah looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. Ryan blinked like he didn't know if he should smile or brace for impact. And Alyssa? She still wouldn't look at me, but I could see the color rising in her cheeks. I picked up my napkin, unfolded it carefully across my lap, and looked across the table at Kendra. "Nice spot you picked," I said casually. "Shame it didn't come with better manners." Kendra made a face like she'd just stepped in something. "Wait, he worked here?" Tom didn't miss a beat. Not just worked, trained under me, one of the sharpest I've ever seen. That shut her up, mouth still open but no sound coming out. Alyssa's eyes flicked toward me, just for a second. I caught the slightest crease in her brow. Confusion? Surprise? Maybe even something like guilt. Hard to tell with her lately. "I thought you worked construction," Ryan muttered, squinting at me like I'd just told him I used to be a magician. "I do," I said. "But fine dining paid my bills for years. Still does, in ways you wouldn't understand." It came out more direct than I expected, but I didn't flinch. I was done softening the edges for this family. Tom motioned for one of the waiters. "Set a place for Derek, next to his wife, please." The young guy nodded and moved quick. They cleared space, shifted glasses, reset silver. A fresh linen napkin appeared out of nowhere, and before I knew it, I was seated right between Ryan and Alyssa. Like that chair had been waiting for me all along. Kendra watched it all, like she was watching a house of cards collapse. Tom clapped me on the back. "I'll send something over from the kitchen. You deserve better than bread and butter tonight." I smiled up at him. "Appreciate it." He gave Kendra one last glance, cool, polite, but firm, then headed back toward the kitchen like he had more important people to deal with. I leaned back in my chair, picked up my water glass, and took a slow sip while the others scrambled to act natural. Alyssa sat rigid, staring at her half-finished scallops. Ryan swirled his wine like he was suddenly very interested in its legs. Hannah kept her eyes on her salad, which she hadn't touched since I sat down. Kendra finally found her voice. "Well," she said, "I suppose everyone has to start somewhere." She smiled. Tight, fake, brittle. "I mean, service work is honorable, of course. Hard work. Not always glamorous, but you don't need to clean it up," I said calmly. She blinked. "I wasn't a waiter," I continued. "I was on track for sous chef by 23. Helped design the winter menu the year Tom won that local food and wine award. You know the seared duck with the bourbon glaze?" She gave a stiff nod, lips pressed into a thin line. "Mine," I said. "That was my recipe." Ryan gave a quiet, "Huh," like that was genuinely the most impressive thing he'd ever heard about me. I reached for the breadbasket. "But yeah, I also waited tables, did dishes, ran the floor, whatever needed to get done. Learned how the whole machine worked from prep to plating." Kendra tried again. "Well, that's quite a journey. And now you're in construction?" "Now I own 2 contracting firms. Do high-end remodels, restaurants, boutique hotels. Big stuff." I tore off a piece of bread. "Still keep a hand in the food world. Consultation. Kitchen layout designs. Sometimes I get called in just to fix flow issues in service. Efficiency is money, and I know both sides of the line." Alyssa turned toward me slowly. "You never told me that." "You never asked," I said, not sharp, just honest. She looked down again. There was a long silence after that. The waiter returned with a small amuse-bouche from the kitchen, citrus-cured salmon on a thin crisp with creme fraiche and caviar. A little luxury in one bite. He placed it in front of me with care. Kendra looked at it, then at me. "I suppose you feel vindicated." I popped it in my mouth, chewed, swallowed, then wiped my lips with the corner of my napkin. "No," I said. "I feel like I finally stopped pretending I'm less than what I am." Kendra scoffed quietly. I leaned forward just slightly, enough to be heard but not make a scene. "I've let you look down on me for years. I let all of you write your own version of who I am because it was easier than fighting over dinner. But this?" I gestured around. "This was your mistake. You tried to embarrass me in a room where I helped build the standard." I sat back and smiled politely. "So, no, Kendra. I don't feel vindicated. I feel done." And for the first time in years, she didn't have anything to say. Kendra leaned in again, smiling like she was about to offer me a mint but really handing me poison. "If you're so self-made, Derek," she said, voice honey-sweet and laced with judgment, "why's my daughter the one paying your bills?" I let out a laugh, loud, full, and real. A few heads at nearby tables turned. "You really believe that?" I asked. She didn't blink. "She's the one with the law career. You just do side work, right? Contracting, manual labor, a few odd jobs." I nodded slowly, playing along. "Right." Then I leaned in, same as she had, and lowered my voice just enough so only our table could hear. "Let's talk about that law career, Kendra, since you're so proud of it. Tell me, how do you think she paid off her student loans?" She blinked. "The bar fees?" More blinking. Alyssa had frozen like a statue beside me. Her fork hovered an inch above her plate, unmoving. Hannah and Ryan had both stopped pretending to eat. I continued, calm and even. "Or the down payment on her office space? The branding consultant? The custom website? You think that came from her clerk's salary?" Kendra shifted. "Well, she worked." "She worked," I agreed. "But not enough to float that whole launch. Boutique law firms don't magically appear because someone got good grades." Silence spread like spilled wine. I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket, pulled out a folded piece of paper and laid it neatly on the white linen tablecloth. "Every business your daughter's invested in, including the firm she brags about on LinkedIn, came from seed money I gave her back when she was still clerking at that mid-sized firm in Hoboken." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I just let it hang. Hannah's jaw dropped. Ryan turned bright red and reached for his water like it might wash away the secondhand shame. Alyssa still hadn't said a word, but I could see the sweat collecting at her temples. I unfolded the paper and slid it toward Kendra with one finger. "This is the original funding agreement. Dated, signed. Covers the first $60,000 I gave her to get her business off the ground. I pulled it from the file this morning. Call it a hunch." Kendra didn't touch it. Just stared at it like it might catch fire. I shrugged. "There's more. Another $35,000 2 years ago when she expanded. 15 after that, when she brought on the new associate. You remember that guy, right? The one who lasted 6 weeks because he tried to flirt with a client?" Alyssa shifted slightly beside me, still not looking my way. I leaned back in my chair, relaxed, arms resting on the edge of the table. "But hey, sure, let's call it side work." Kendra opened her mouth, probably to start gaslighting her way out of this. But I wasn't done. "I never asked for credit," I said. "Not from her, and definitely not from you. I was proud of her. Still am in some ways. But I'm tired of being the background character in the story of your perfect family, the one you smile at in public and roll your eyes about in private." Ryan cleared his throat. "So, you paid for all of it?" I looked at him. "Every cent." He looked at Alyssa, then at Hannah. No one spoke. Tom's staff brought over the next course, something delicate and beautifully plated. I didn't touch it. Kendra, now visibly rattled, laughed under her breath and said, "Well, she never mentioned any of this." "Of course not," I said, "because the story sounds better when she's the one pulling herself up by the bootstraps. When she's the attorney with the big future and I'm the guy who brings tools to Thanksgiving." Kendra scoffed, but she wasn't smiling anymore. "You all made it really easy to play that role," I added, turning to Alyssa. "Didn't you?" She didn't answer, just pressed her napkin into her lap like it gave her something to do with her hands. I looked at her for a moment longer, then turned back to Kendra. "You want to know what's really funny? I like being in the background. I didn't need the credit. I just wanted the respect." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. I picked up the funding agreement and folded it again, slid it back into my jacket. "That's the difference between me and you," I said, voice low but steady. "You confuse silence with weakness. I just didn't think it was worth the fight. I looked around the table one last time. But now I do." Kendra wasn't done. She took a long sip of her wine, set the glass down like she was placing a crown on a pillow, and said, "We're not really used to, service folk in the family." There it was. Not a punch, just a paper cut delivered with a smile. I picked up my fork, cut clean through the amuse-bouche Tom had sent over, and said, You say that like it's a bad thing. She blinked. That fake smile flicker when someone gets slapped with words they weren't expecting. Across the table, Hannah had gone quiet. The smug little grin she'd been working since I walked in, gone. She just kept pushing a green bean around her plate like it might reveal the answer to her embarrassment if she stared at it long enough. Ryan, who usually had something slick to say, suddenly looked like a guy trying to calculate the tip on a check he couldn't afford. And Alyssa? She was still staring at her plate, still silent, still pretending that if she didn't move, maybe the whole thing would pass without her needing to get involved. It was pathetic. I took a slow breath, trying to cool the heat crawling up my neck. I could handle Kendra's digs. I'd been handling them since day one. What I couldn't stomach anymore was Alyssa sitting next to me like some statue with perfect posture and no spine. I turned toward her slightly, voice low. "Anything you want to say?" Her lips parted, barely, but nothing came out. I leaned back, looked around the table. "You know what's funny?" I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Y'all think I'm the outsider here. Like I snuck in through the back door with a toolbox and a lunch pail." Kendra rolled her eyes, but she didn't speak. I kept going. "But I paid for this family more than any of you have. I've backed the businesses, I've floated the holidays, I've made the behind-the-scenes things work that none of you ever saw fit to ask about." My eyes landed on Alyssa again. She looked tired, or maybe exposed. I couldn't tell anymore. "And you," I said, softer now. "You've let them talk down to me for years. You've let your mom call me blue-collar like it's a slur. You laughed along when Hannah joked that I looked more Home Depot than Harvard at your graduation dinner." She blinked, like maybe she hadn't expected me to say it out loud. "I kept telling myself you didn't mean it," I said. "That you just didn't want to rock the boat. But it's not the boat you were protecting. It was them." She finally looked at me, eyes wet, but her mouth still shut tight. And that's when it really hit me. She'd never been in my corner. Not at our wedding, when Kendra made a toast about her daughter marrying a man who knows how to work hard, even if he doesn't look like what we pictured. Not last Christmas, when her brother gave me a socket set as a joke gift and everyone laughed, like it was harmless fun. Not ever. She didn't defend me because deep down she agreed with them. Or worse, she didn't care enough to disagree. I pushed my plate slightly forward. Appetite gone. "You know what this dinner really is?" I said quietly. "It's not just some fancy night out, it's a mirror, and I'm finally looking into it." Alyssa's eyes dropped again. Of course they did. Tom's waiter came by to refill water. I waved him off gently. I stood up, brushed the napkin from my lap, and laid it across the untouched appetizer. "Thanks for the meal," I said. "But I think I've already had my fill." Kendra's voice cut through the silence like a dropped plate. "You gave her money?" Her mascaraed eyes were wide now, like she'd just been told the earth spun the wrong way. Her wine glass rattled slightly as she set it down. "More than once," I said flatly. "But tonight, I'm done giving." Alyssa finally turned to me, her voice the softest it had been all night. "Can we just talk at home?" I stared at her. All the moments raced through my mind at once. Her silence when her mom mocked my work, the polite little nod she gave when someone took a jab at me, her perfect dinner party smile while I carried the weight in the background. Talk at home? Number. That ship had sailed 5 years ago, maybe longer. I stood, slow and steady. The chair scraped against the tile. Heads turned. Forks paused. My heart beat once, deep, solid, like a gavel in my chest. I looked her straight in the eye. "No," I said. "You had your shot." Her lips parted slightly like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. Kendra stood up too, trying to cut me off with that ridiculous little clutch still dangling from her wrist like she was at a gala. "You can't just leave like this." I smiled. It wasn't warm. "Watch me." I turned to Tom, who was now standing near the service station watching everything unfold, his arms crossed loosely, like a man watching justice be served at his own table. I walked over and offered my hand. He took it without hesitation. "Thanks, man," I said. "You reminded me who I am." Tom gave me a nod. Don't let them forget it again. I stepped away from him, not bothering to glance back toward the table. Not for Alyssa. Not for Kendra. Not for any of them. And I walked out. Through that swanky steakhouse, past the host stand, through the double glass doors that hissed shut behind me like a book slamming closed. The street outside was cold and loud and real. I didn't head for the car right away. I just stood on the sidewalk for a second, letting the air hit my face. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Probably Alyssa, or Kendra, or both. I didn't check it. Instead, I took a breath. One of those deep ones that clears something old out of your lungs. I wasn't going home to talk. I was going home to end it. Back at the apartment, I flipped on the hallway light and went straight to the office. The room still smelled faintly like the old cedar desk I'd refinished last fall. That desk used to feel like a symbol of progress. Now it just felt like a holding cell for all the documents that tied me to a woman who'd never defended me once in her life. I pulled open the bottom drawer, the fireproof one. Inside was everything. The partnership contracts, the silent agreements, the funding records. I grabbed what I needed, sat down, and started snapping photos with my phone. The seed money agreement, the investment ledger, the power of attorney form she'd begged me to sign when she started her firm. Only I never did. I had the unsigned copy right there, still pristine. When I was done, I packed a bag. Not in a rage, not rushed, just done. A hoodie, a pair of jeans, my laptop, toothbrush, the basics. I didn't even bother with the closet in the bedroom. 20 minutes later, I was zipping up the duffel when I heard the key in the lock. Alyssa stepped in, heels clicking on the floor like they were out of place in our too-quiet apartment. She froze when she saw the bag. "You're leaving?" I nodded. "Yeah." She stared at me, stunned. "You're being dramatic." I let out a breath, calm and steady. "No, Alyssa. This isn't drama. That dinner? That was a test. One you failed 100 times before. I just finally decided to grade it." She opened her mouth, closed it again. I slung the bag over my shoulder and walked past her. And this time, she didn't even try to stop me. She stood in the doorway like she wasn't sure whether to come in or call someone to stop me. "You're leaving?" she said again, slower this time. "Yeah." I didn't stop packing, just zipped the duffel shut and set it by the door. "You made your choice back there." Alyssa stepped forward, arms crossed, like she was trying to hold the situation together with posture alone. "Come on, Derek. It was just dinner." "No, Alyssa," I said, turning to face her. "It was never just dinner. It was years of dinners. Years of me getting looked down on, talked over, left out, and you letting it happen. That's not fair. Isn't it?" I tilted my head. "You watched your mom humiliate me, and you didn't say a word. Same as every time before." She hesitated, then softened her voice. "You're blowing this out of proportion. My mom, she's just complicated." I laughed, shaking my head. "No, she's not. She's clear as day. And so are you." Her face tightened. "So what? You're just walking away from everything? Just like that?" "No," I said, calm. "I'm taking what's mine, and then I'm walking away." She blinked, confused. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a manila envelope, the same one I'd slid into my bag with all the key docs. "This is the agreement," I said. "The one from when you started your firm. You remember it, right?" Her eyes narrowed. "You said that was just temporary, that we'd move things into my name later." "We talked about that," I corrected. "I never signed it over." She opened the flap and pulled out the copy. It was clean, my signature line blank. Hers? Crystal clear? "That's... You kept this?" she asked, looking like she just realized the fire had been burning the whole time. "Yeah, because I knew one day I might need it." She stared at the document, then looked up. "So, you're saying you own the firm?" 51%, I said. "Majority stake. I funded it, I structured it, I covered your startup costs and your first-year overhead." "That doesn't mean anything without..." "It means everything," I cut in. "Especially when I have the signed contract, the bank records, the wire transfers, all of it." "You built your name." But I built your foundation. She stood there silent, like she was trying to figure out if this was real or just a very specific nightmare. Oh, I added, walking toward the hallway closet. And the penthouse downtown? That's under my LLC. You just signed the lease agreement. The mortgage is mine. She actually took a step back. You can't do this, she said, voice shaking now. I already did. There was something dark in the silence that followed. Not angry, not loud, just final. She put the envelope down, carefully, like it might shatter. I gave you everything I had, I said, quieter now. And not once did you ever have my back. She looked up at me, her voice brittle. I thought we were building something. We were, I said. I just didn't realize I was the only one laying bricks. I grabbed the duffel, slung it over my shoulder. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. Probably Tom, checking in, or my lawyer. I'd sent him the documents on the drive home. Alyssa didn't move. She didn't plead, didn't apologize. Just stood there like she couldn't believe I was really going. But I was. Not running, not trying to hurt her. Just done. At the front door I paused, not to look back, just to breathe. Good luck, I said, with the firm and your mother. Then I walked out. The door clicked shut behind me as I stepped into the hallway, but I didn't make it more than 3 steps before I heard her voice. Sharp, brittle. If you think you're walking away with half, she snapped, you're delusional. I turned, slow, and looked her dead in the eye. Half? I said, almost laughing. Alyssa, I own the firm. You just operate it. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. You don't own anything, she managed, voice rising. You said it was hers, I remember. We agreed. We talked, Alyssa. You assumed. I never transferred anything. I kept the original structure. Majority stake under my name. Signed by you. Never signed over by me. I unzipped the duffel and pulled out a folder. Just a copy, but clean and crisp. I flipped to the first page and held it out. Page 2. Read it. She snatched it from my hand like she could undo it by force. Her eyes darted over the document, and I watched the color drain from her face like someone pulling a plug. You kept this? I nodded. I kept everything. She looked up, shaking her head like the words might knock something loose. But I'm the one who put in the hours, the cases, the clients. You were the face. I was the foundation, I said. Don't get it twisted. She stepped back like I'd slapped her. You're doing this to hurt me. I'm doing this because I finally see you. You never wanted a partner, Alyssa. You wanted a prop, someone who paid the bills, kept quiet, and let you take the credit. She turned away, pacing now. This is insane. You're being insane. I let her pace. I was done chasing her approval. Done explaining myself to someone who never once defended me when it mattered. Oh, and by the way, I added casually as I zipped the folder back into the bag, that penthouse downtown, the one with the rooftop and the skyline view, that's under my LLC. Hope you weren't planning on entertaining there. She stopped dead in her tracks. You didn't. I did. Has been for 2 years now. The lease, in your name. The deed, all mine. She turned back toward me, her hands now trembling. You can't do this. I already did. I said it flat. No drama, no triumph, just the truth. She stared at me for a long second, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw it, the shift. The mask slipped. Not anger, not guilt. Fear, because she thought she was the one holding the wheel all this time. But she just realized she'd been sitting in the passenger seat, giving directions in a car she didn't own. I walked to the door again, my hand on the knob. I didn't want to say anything else. I wanted it done. But she wasn't finished. You're not even going to fight for us? She said suddenly, voice cracking. After everything we've built? I turned to her one last time. You built a brand, I said. I built a life. The problem is, you only ever cared about one of them. She didn't answer, didn't move, just stood there, blinking, like the lights had finally come on in a theater after the last act. I opened the door. The hallway smelled like someone had just cooked garlic and basil in their unit, some normal, cozy life happening a few doors down. It felt weirdly comforting. "I'll have my lawyer contact yours," I said without looking back. Then I left. And this time the silence didn't feel cold. It felt like peace. A month later, I sat on the terrace of that same penthouse Alyssa used to call ours. The air was crisp, sky a dark velvet behind the skyline, and a single cold beer sweated on the side table next to the divorce papers. I didn't feel victorious. I felt steady. My attorney leaned back in the chair across from me, flipping through the final signatures. "Clean cut," he said, satisfied. "You kept everything." I gave him a slow nod. Wasn't about keeping. It was about finally knowing what was mine. He nodded, collected the papers, and left me alone with the quiet hum of the city below. I took a long sip of the beer. Bitterness and peace in the same swallow. The phone buzzed on the table. "Alyssa, can we talk?" I stared at it for a second. Just sat there, the glow of the screen lighting up her name like it still mattered. I typed back. "About what?" A minute passed, then another. I don't know what to do. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just a white flag tossed through a text screen. I shook my head, smiling a little. It wasn't cruel, just honest. She didn't know what to do, because for the first time, she wasn't standing on something I'd built for her. She'd been balancing on a foundation I laid while she told everyone she did it all on her own. I let her. For years I let her. But now? I blocked the number. Then I blocked her mom's again. She'd called a dozen times from different lines, different fake names on caller ID. One even said, Caroline V., like that was supposed to fool me. I leaned back in the patio chair, looked out over the city lights. This was mine now. Fully. Not because I fought for it, but because I remembered who I was. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to earn a seat at someone else's table. I'd built my own. And the ones who didn't see my value, they could eat somewhere else.
YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.